A&M is one of the great mysteries in college sports because you anybody who's close to this sport, you need passion, you need money, you need facilities, you need access to talent. A&M is not missing any. You need a great coach. A&M is not missing any of these things, and yet they have never really been able to be the juggernaut. For people who maybe haven't been paying close attention or have wondered the same things, why don't we see more years where A&M is the story of college football?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I did this story earlier this summer. It's called Six Theories About College Football's Would-Be Elites, talking about what's holding Texas A&M back. And I think the one of the biggest things is lack of administrative stability. Texas A&M, when you look at the programs that are the most successful, like Alabama and Clemson and Oklahoma, one thing that's a common thread through a lot of those programs is stability at the presidential level, stability at the athletic director level. And Texas A&M hasn't had that, not to the degrees that those elite programs have had. Georgia's had 3 presidents since 1998. A&M since 2004, I think, has had 6 and is now going on its 7th president, and that's not including the interim presidents. And then they've had 3 athletic directors ever since they've been in the SEC in 2012. And that upheaval, I think, creates a little bit of a power vacuum, and it allows some other influence to get in there. So that has been a little bit of an issue. I think the head coaching moves, not necessarily, I don't think necessarily have been bad, but like the Dennis Franchione hire clearly didn't work out. But Kevin Sumlin did really, really well, and then they moved on from him. And then Jimbo Fisher had a good start for 3 years, and then hasn't really been able to kind of catch it back. And they've just not the timing on and the extensions. They've been very early to give extensions, which they gave them to Kevin Sumlin. They gave a huge one to Jimbo Fisher in 2021 before he even signed that number 1 class. And so they put themselves in a difficult position with that. And then the other thing that's interesting is Stephen McGee, who's the Texas A&M quarterback, had mentioned this to me, that he felt that A&M fans are not demanding enough of success. And when I say that is when they go, the way he put it is there's an acceptance of 9-3, that if we go 9-3, we had a great year. Whereas if you go 9-3 at Alabama, buddy, people are going to lose their minds. And I think there's a sense of, because they haven't won at a high level consistently, there's an acceptance of that when they do, okay, we've made it, and then it's going to stay this way. Where having a great season, I think, is one thing, but maintaining it year over year over year, that is really what is the true test. And they've really struggled to kind of put that all together. And I also do think the move to the SEC, while it brought a ton of financial benefits and benefits for Texas A&M football and their brand and the university, it also made their journey harder. Like they've been in the SEC West, which is probably the toughest conference to be a national title contender in, because you got Alabama and LSU. So even if you're A&M and you recruit a top 5 class, that top 5 class may be 4th best in the SEC, because Alabama and Georgia and LSU may have signed a class better than you. And so I think there's a lot of different factors at play. And some of it is just bad luck too. I think there's some of that too, but I think there's a little bit of everything in there that I think has added up and held A&M back, even though they have all the things that you want, like you said, facilities, fan base, state, the recruiting footprint, all of those things, access to players. They have all the other ingredients you need. But I think some of those things that I mentioned are keys why they haven't really gotten over the hump consistently.
Which leads us to the future, Sam. Is Bobby Petrino going to be the Renaissance bringer in Aggieland? I'm on board. I don't know if they're playoff bound, but I think he fixes things. Where do you stand on? Are we going to see this streak end?
Yeah, I think I don't know, because I don't know how long term Bobby's going to be there. Like, is this a 1 year or 2 year thing? Is he trying to get a SEC head coaching job or a
probably
Power
depends
5
on how this goes?
Job? Yeah, exactly. But I will say for this season, I think A&M has a chance to bounce back and make some noise, because if Jimbo clearly is going to not be the primary play caller, Bobby Petrino has said as much. It's him calling the offense. And I even heard Max Johnson, one of the quarterbacks, mention that it's Bobby Petrino running the quarterback meetings. It's Bobby Petrino primarily, handling stuff. And if that delegation of duty works out that way, and they just let Petrino do what he needs to do, Texas A&M has the offensive talent to be one of the better teams in the country.
No question.
Like
no
the
question.
Connor Wegman, Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, Anaya Smith, Ruben Owens, you name it. They got their whole offensive line back.
It's a real dudes everywhere situation.
It really is. Like they have one of the most talented receiving cores in the country, in my opinion. I don't think there's much question about that. And I think Connor Wegman's going to be a star. I'm a believer in him as a quarterback. But if Petrino's able to do what he can do and has done in the past, is design really good offenses that score a lot of points, and they can just make an improvement defensively. They struggled against the run last year. Some of those guys will grow up, some of those young defensive linemen. I do think this has a chance to be a good team. The question is, can all the other stuff sort itself out? They had some discipline issues last year. Can they avoid some of that? Can Jimbo get a little bit more of a handle on this locker room? If can they be organized? Can they be disciplined? Can they do it week in and week out? Can they stay like this on a straight line rather than going up and down from week to week? I think that they need some consistency there. But Petrino, I certainly think, can make this team a factor in the SEC.
I think that's the most interesting question I think about A&M is, if you're one of the heavy hitters in the NIL game, can it work? Can you pull everything together? Because I've heard from a lot of coaches this offseason, and certainly they have some element of watching A&M fail last year, that they say it's not going to work, that you can bring talent in, but they're not as invested. And I don't know. I think time will tell. We haven't seen enough of it. But I think that there is a lot of people in the sport who don't believe in, why are you going to give a guy, a huge NIL deal, mid 6 digits to come if he doesn't really want to be there, and I talked to one coach who said, "Yay, you give me $13 million for a recruiting class, buddy, I'm using that to fund my next 8 recruiting classes. I'm not using that on one class."
Right.
So I don't know. I think they're an interesting test case of, you look at A&M, Oregon, Tennessee, Miami. I guess we'll see how Life Wallet sorts out. But the people who are writing these big checks and have a lot of money in the locker room, can you win that way? We'll see.
I don't think it's necessarily a money issue. I think it's a fit issue, because it's not the money you spend, in my opinion. It's what is the fit of that player. Does that player fit in your program from a personality standpoint?
Well,
does that player fit in your program from a scheme standpoint? Do they want to be there? And that is one thing that I think before that 22 class, I thought Jimbo Fisher did a pretty solid job of finding guys who loved football and finding guys who were fits for his program. And I think that was one of the reasons why he's been a successful recruiter. I do think there was a level of obsession that Jimbo and that staff got to in that 2022 class of just trying to land, hey, we're going to land the number one class. We're going to land the number one class ever, of all time. Mm-hmm. And I think that obsession got a little unhealthy. And I think they probably took some guys without regard to fit. But if you deploy the money strategically, and if you are prioritize fit for your roster and your scheme, then yeah, I do think it can work. But you heard Anaya Smith talk about it at SEC Media Days that some of those guys had, were attracted to come there because of that. And yeah, you need to find the whys of why somebody wants to be there. And that's ultimately what's going to determine how successful your team is and how good of a chemistry you have in your locker room.